What is up, my bodyweight warriors, and welcome to my 3 best PNF exercises for the side splits. I already have on this channel a full loaded intense side split routine, as well as some updates from my 3-month and 7-month progressions, which I'll link to in the description down below. You can grab the full routine and then also the tips and updates videos that I have made, which also might be useful to give some context to this video. As I mentioned in the last 7-month update, I've been using a lot of PNF lately for the side splits, and I found it to be very effective. Switched onto it by Emmett Lewis when I met him for an interview, and I've been applying his recommendations since. So before we jump into the exercise, I just want to quickly mention what PNF is. It is proprioceptive neuromuscular facilitation. And this is essentially maybe what you would class as active flexibility, whatever you want to call it. You're essentially strengthening and stretching the muscle at the same time. I think PNF allows this to be much more scalable, so you can work with beginners and people who don't have as much experience and still be effective, whereas the loaded stuff does take a little bit more preparation to avoid the risk of injury, which is why I'm just going to make this video. We're going to start from the easiest exercises and work up to the most intense. The first exercise that I want to show you is the frog pose. This is a really simple pose in which you're just on the floor on all fours with your knees spread as wide as you can. So you're essentially in a half middle split. You haven't got your legs fully extended, you're just in the middle splits from the knees up. This is going to give a really great stretch on the adductors. It's going to bring a little bit of hamstrings, but the main reason we want to do this exercise is for the activation. I personally still use this exercise every time I train the middle splits, and actually most times I warm up, because I find it's a really great mobilizer for the hip, and it's something that's quick, simple, and not too intense that you can kind of throw in wherever. How I perform this exercise is I hop into the position, I go as far as I will allow that day. Usually it's not so good because this is kind of my warm-up exercise. I then move around for about 15 to 30 seconds, just kind of moving in and out of that range of motion, forwards and backwards, even a little bit side to side, just trying to figure out where is tight, what needs stretching. From here, I perform the first set of PNF contractions. And for this first set, we're going to focus on the adductors, so that's the inside of the thigh. What we're going to do is we're going to essentially try to force our knees to the ground and really contract those adductors hard. We're going to hold this contraction for 10 seconds. We're then going to take a 5-second rest, and then we're going to repeat another 10-second contraction with another 5-second rest. So a total of 30 seconds of work. During both of these reps, we're going to try and push our knees out a little bit further and increase that range of motion. Following this, we're going to take another sort of 15 to 30 second break. Just as before, we are moving around, moving back and forward in that range of motion, getting a little bit more used to it, before we then start the second set of PNF contractions. So the first PNF contraction was focused on the antagonist, the adductors, and we're trying to get them to relax and open up more. And the second set of contractions is going to focus on the agonist muscle, which is the glute complex. For this contraction is the opposite of the previous one, whereas we're pushing the knees into the ground. This time we want to feel like we're trying to pick our knees up and we're trying to force our hips into the ground, but we're doing this by contracting our glutes. Using this contraction, we're going to perform the exact same as we did before, those 2 reps of 10-second contraction and 5-second relaxation. After that is all is over, you can then move about for another 15 to 30 seconds, and that is the set done. As I mentioned, I like to do 1 set of this as like my warm-up to middle splits, just to kind of activate muscles and get that mind-muscle connection going. If this isn't intense enough for you, you can use a resistance band or add a weight onto your hips to make the stretch a little bit more intense. The next exercise I want to share with you is what Emmett Lewis calls the pissing dog. And this exercise, as I mentioned, was introduced to me by Emmett Lewis, and this is kind of where I've seen the biggest gains in my middle splits. In the same way as in the frog pose, we were trying to contract our glutes to then open our legs further. This is essentially what we're replicating in this movement, except we're only doing 1 leg at a time. You want to start in a quadruped position, so on all fours. You're then going to start with one side, right or left, it doesn't matter, we're going to repeat on both sides. You're going to lift that leg up as high as you can by contracting your glutes and kind of forcing your hips to open. We're then going to hold this position for 10 seconds. You notice you might see a theme here. Relax for 5 seconds, and then we're going to repeat that for 3 reps total. So 45 seconds on each side, 10 seconds contraction, 5 seconds relaxation. And then all we're going to do is after we've done those 3 reps, we're going to swap sides and repeat the same process. The progression on from this would be doing the exact same movement, however we're going to use a straight leg. When you're in this straight leg variation, you want to make sure that you slightly externally rotate your legs. So you're going to twist your legs so that your top of your foot is pointing up to the sky, and then you also want to point your toes, and this is going to help emphasize the glute contraction. Again, you're sticking out to the side, you're trying to keep that neutral hip position where it's 90 degrees over your knee, and you're lifting and contracting your glutes to make this movement happen. Just want to make a couple of form points that is really important when performing this exercise. The first is that people often will contract their lower back to compensate for having weak glutes. So you'll kind of see yourself scrunching up on the side, and we don't want this. We're not contracting the right muscles, or we're trying to do a progression that is too hard for us. If you notice yourself doing this, just film yourself, try to make a contraction, try and focus the activation on that glute. The second mistake people make is they go too far away from that parallel hip position. Ideally, when we're performing this exercise, we want to keep our hips as parallel as we can to the floor. This is going to make the exercise a hell of a lot harder, and it's actually a struggle just to kind of lift your foot 5 to 10 centimeters off the floor. You will notice that initially you might feel that you can lift your foot 30 centimeters off the floor, but what you actually notice is the most of the work is coming from a rotation in your hips rather than the contraction of the glutes and the opening of the leg as you would do in the middle split. So again, avoid this. And then this exercise kind of brings me on to the last exercise that I'm going to recommend, because often I will do a set of 3 reps on each side, and then I will slide down into the middle splits, in which I will perform the final exercise, and that is just some standard PNF in the middle split position. We're basically going to be copying the same protocol that we use in the frog pose, but applying it to the middle split hold. Once you slide down into your max range of motion in the middle splits, using your arms to support you, you're going to do the first set of contractions, which, just like the frog pose, is going to be focused on the adductors. We're going to contract again for 10 seconds, so you're going to be pushing your feet into the ground, contracting those adductors for 10 seconds, relaxing for 5. After you've performed 1 rep of this contraction, you're again going to try and get a little bit more range of motion like before, but instead of performing 2 reps, we're only going to be performing 1 rep, and then we're just going to be alternating back and forth between the different PNF types. So this time we're going to do the second type of contraction, which is more focused on the agonist, the glute. Just as before, we're trying to push our hips to the ground by using our glutes and trying to lift our knees up. We're going to replicate that in the full middle split position. So we're going to contract our glutes, we're going to try and push our hips forward further into that middle split position, and we're going to try and feel like we're lifting our legs off the floor. This is a very humbling position, and it might take a little bit of time to get that mind muscle connection so you can really get that contraction going. This is why I like the frog pose exercise as kind of a warm-up or a beginner exercise to learn that. You can then kind of alternate back and forth between this adductor and this glute contraction. I really struggle to do more than 4 total sort of reps, which would be 2 of both the adductor and glute. At that point, I'm kind of like, I've had enough. Those 60 seconds is plenty. As far as some form cues go with the middle splits, all the good standard form cues apply. We want to try and keep straight legs. We want to make sure our hip is in that anterior pelvic tilt, and we want to make sure that we're under control and we're taking some nice, deep, calm, controlled breaths. But that is kind of it. Those are the 3 best PNF exercises in my opinion, starting from the easiest frog pose to the pissing dog to the full middle split PNF contractions. There's a whole range there from beginner to advanced. Really just give it a go, see how you feel, notice if you have any balances, notice if you have any tight parts, and work on them. All of these exercises can be performed in replacement of the main loaded mobility exercise that I recommend in my loaded side split routine. So that would be the middle split isometric. You could replace that with these PNF exercises, but I'll leave that up to you. We all have different needs, different abilities, and we're all at different points in this journey, so we need to just select an exercise and a process that is appropriate to us. That being said, if you do have any questions about any of the exercises, any of the techniques that I mentioned in this video, please leave a comment in the comment section down below, and I'll do my best to respond to you. Don't forget, you can also buy the Bodyweight Warrior t-shirts. Again, they will be linked in the description down below if you want to snag yourself one. If you enjoyed this video, hit that thumbs up button. Please support the channel. If you have a friend who is struggling with their middle splits, then please share this with them. But that has been it for this week, guys. Have a strong and supple week, and peace.